Right, well, thank you for coming on. I'll try and keep this kind of brief. Obviously, these subjects are going to be really in depth, and we could probably have a separate podcast on each one of them. But we started talking a few weeks ago, and your background within enterprise level organisations, the merger and acquisition phases, the post merger integration phases for companies like Virgin Media and O2, leading, global strategy director for HPE, your time as director of sales at Oracle. So you've got some amazing insights there. And one thing that we also touched on was your love for fitness and physical sort of well-being, and how that supports your sort of business performance as well. So I don't know if we'll have time to touch on it all, but it's great to have you on and discuss some of these topics.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. And talking of fitness, I love the picture in the background there of Arnie. So yeah, it's good. So something we aspire to. Yeah, quite a sort of a checkered history in different sectors and different industries. So for you, I think you were interested, is it fair, more on the learnings from some of the, whether we call them integrations or M&As and stuff. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think because there's been so many over the past couple of years, so many businesses have been acquired, some successfully, some not. I mean, now you've got, I speak to candidates every day who are being made redundant. Their company's recently gone through a merger and acquisition, and now they've been made redundant. I often get calls from candidates who they know that their company is being acquired, so they're out on the market, they're looking, because I think there's a preconceived idea that either they're going to be made redundant, or that the culture is going to change and things aren't going to be the same as they were. So just kind of touching on some of those points, really.
Right. Okay. I think that's fair. So I mean, I'm specifically sort of referencing enterprise. So say more than 1,000 employees, whatever that number is, and I've been part of the receiving end. So part of that acquirement, if you like, and on the customer side as well. So sort of for me, some of the big learnings. I think number one is you have to be really careful up front. Everything, if you get it right up front, downstream, it makes life a lot easier, trust me. But in the enterprise space, I think there's a lot of competing forces. And examples would be, you've got investors, shareholders are looking for a specific thing, and that's usually a return. And then you've got the organisation that exists clearly, and is still trying to deliver on a 3-year plan. So what you've got to ensure is that even if there are discrepancies and differences between the expectation of investors and shareholders, that somehow you find a way to calibrate with the organisation who have still got to deliver the BAU. I mean, and let's be honest. If you're involved in acquisition, merger, whatever, there's only a few reasons for doing it. One is to sweat the asset, so that can be synergies, consolidation. The other is to pivot to something else, and there's a reason for doing it, whether that's technology, AI driven, whatever it is, different markets. So I think you've just got to align the dots up front, recognize and appreciate there will be differences, and there's different players with different scopes, different agendas. And then somehow the program that brings it together has to marry the two together, and then try and calibrate it all the way down to the execution. I mean, there's only two things that matter. One is obviously the customer, and the other is the employee as well. So, as long as those two are not forgotten about on the journey, you stand a good chance of success. So I think that's where I would try and ensure, terms of reference, the OKRs or KPIs, whatever it is really well understood at sort of the macro level. And I think that's really, really important.
So what would you say your sort of top 5 must-dos or non-negotiables would be, just to ensure, long-term success?
Great question. So number one is make sure everyone is really clear on what the reason is for doing what you're doing, notwithstanding any NDAs and everything else, but at least be clear in the communication, and that's communication of listening as well as, obviously pushing down different types of communication. I think that's one.
Externally and internally, both.
Yeah, both. I mean, years ago, I remember my coach and mentor just said, try and get everyone facing in the same direction. And I think that's the simplest way to describe it. If you're all focused in the same direction, you've got more chance of a success. But when you're all competing, again, moving in different directions, it's going to be difficult. I think that's one. The other number two, and I probably won't have 5, and they're all sort of modular because they're all linked to each other. Number 2 for me, and this is where I think it has most chance of failing. When the program is constructed, you'll have an integration office or a program office that will drive the change, but they need the people who are actually doing the work day to day, so the business as usual. That puts tremendous pressure and stress on those individuals because they're looking for that experience and then obviously imparting it as part of the integration and that plan. So if you imagine, I think they say for a successful transformation, it's 30% of people who are involved in business as usual. So 30% would need to migrate, novate to helping with that program. That puts tremendous pressure on the organization, and we can come on to the culture and everything like that. So I think you've just got to be really clear how you will deliver it and the transition points between the different stages of the integration. And don't forget, you've got a full stack, whether it's technology stack, product, systems, structure, operating model, whatever. So that all needs to be really carefully thought through. The other area where it fails is, and this is a non-negotiable, is in the financial architecture of the deal. So what I mean by that is you'll see that usually for a rather large integration, they'll have funding for year 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then it just dries up because it should have been done. Invariably, it won't have been finished. And, we're all aware of some of the integrations that are still going on sort of 4 and 5 years downstream. So then it's how does it fund? How do you fund those changes and who funds it? And that's where you get some really interesting dynamics between the business units and cost and challenges and margins and stuff like that. So I think you've got to look about how you're actually going to fund the change. And that, who's going to fund if, for example, something like I was reading last week, 60% of the scope is reasonably solid, 40% is missing. So suddenly you've got, So if you've got an activity in it, to move a technology stack from A to B, and it's not in the plan, well, who funds it? Does that come out of BAU? Whatever, is that capital expenditure, all that good stuff. So I think that's where you've got to be really, really sort of clear. So I think if you do those 3 things, so number 1, make sure you know why it's happening. I think that for me is absolutely key. This whole business as usual, how you integrate with the program itself, and don't put pressure on the staff, and protect that, because then that affects obviously the culture and stuff. I think we'll touch on that. And then the third thing is the financial element. Make sure it hangs together from an architectural point of view, a financial architectural point of view. It all hangs together, and it's certainly the big ticket items and how that will look into.
For factoring in the, I suppose, like the fund, that if everything doesn't go wrong, it doesn't hit the time scales, you're not on target. How do you then pay for that extra 6 months, 12 months, whatever you need, without affecting BAU? Because if you're having to lend, say, 30% of your BAU team, then your service is going to go down, isn't it, by 30%?
Yeah.
You thought, anyway.
And that's the big thing about, sort of the attrition. So yeah, just make sure it's really clear, and those parameters are clear. Yeah.
And one thing I think we touched on was about the culture. You know, you've got two different cultures, regardless
Yeah.
of, I suppose,
Yeah.
of the company, no matter what, and if they were competitors as well. How do you maintain what made them both great, or are you kind of creating something new? I mean, what's the way to, you know, keep the culture?
Well, it depends on the organisation. So if you have an organic and an inorganic growth strategy, you can have multiple sort of acquisitions. Okay, so you can have a dilution of the culture or the climate, which is obviously that comes from the top, from the leadership. So first of all, it's sometimes can be more than just two. Okay, but on the bigger sort of acquisitions and the mergers and things like that, let's be blunt. And this goes back to what I said right at the beginning. You have competing forces. The shareholders, are they actually interested in the culture? Do they care about the culture, or is it the return on the investment? And that's not being critical of anyone or anything, but you know, so there has got to be a realization around, you know, what that culture, you know, do we? It's not that we don't care, but is it their number one priority? Okay.
Well, if it's the PLC, then, you know, no matter what, they need to show growth, don't they? They need, otherwise they're always going backwards. Whereas if they're limited, is it slightly different?
Yeah, exactly. So if that rings true, and then that's fine, and then the culture is the culture, then that will evolve and form over a period of time. I think what I've seen over the 70 odd acquisitions is this, linking back to this, the pressure on the business as usual then drives sort of sickness, which then in turn drives attrition. So this is where you get into a very interesting dynamic where you can actually lose, you know, the high performing or the more experienced members of staff that you need. And therefore the climate changes, people are slightly, you know, they're not as motivated and energized and stuff. So I think it's really important from a bottom up to invest the time in your employees and manage that communication. I think it was 2 out of 10 in a large, 2 out of 10 employees will thrive as a result of a large merger or acquisition. Now, how that was defined, it wasn't obvious. So, in other words, were they promoted? Did they get extra responsibilities that came with extra remuneration, whatever? But believe, you know, if 80% either stay as they are or actually deteriorate in terms of whether that's personal performance. Or whether that's as a consequence of company performance, you know, and each one needs to be looked at as its own use case and, you know, as outcome, so business outcome. So really interesting. So I think you have to be really mindful if you've got a culture that is a strong culture, so not necessarily aligned to a particular brand, but just a really good group of individuals. Obviously, you're going to nurture that. You're going to get the best. You're going to take the best from the 2 or the 3 acquisitions and mergers, bring them together, you know, and really try and develop that and nurture that and exploit that in the nicest possible way. But let's be honest, some of these acquisitions are to drive change, and there will be winners and losers. And this is where I think, and it's confidence from the employees. If you look across the UK, the industry, I think the average tenure in the maturer organisations is about 13 years. So there's a lot of steady state. There's not been much rotation. They haven't moved around. So employees have got to think about, you know, future. Nothing stands still, as we know. So what does it mean for them? And have the confidence as well to build out outside of their existing sort of work-based and organisation, and have other options as well. You know. And I think that's very important for the employees. It's a two-way thing. This, it's the organisation driving the change, but obviously the employee can drive the change as well if they don't, perhaps like what they see or feel that they've gone as far as they can in that organisation. So I think I'll probably stop there. But there's a lot in that, and I think it's something that is overlooked as part of the programme. But the fundamental question is, do we care? The right answer is yeah. Everyone cares about the people. But you don't always see that. You don't always see that.
I think I hear this all the time. You could work for an organisation that maybe has a bad reputation for not looking after their staff. But if you had a fantastic boss that spent time with you, listened to you, helped you develop, you're going to stay there, aren't you? It's that human kind of connection. And I think that's why even, global businesses that thrive for that small business feel and that human sort of element, they tend to do well and tend to keep the staff a lot more, don't they?
At the end of the day, it's about people and relationships, and working as part of a team, whether that's a sort of a smaller level, a micro level, or a macro level. So, it should be one team, and it should. And it's the parts of that team, spinning together as a service fabric, which will drive better results and better outcome. So it's a fascinating piece on the culture, and the climate and the tone as well. I mean, I was in an organisation this morning, and it's not a sector I'm familiar with, but I could just tell it had a great climate, a great culture, and you could just feel it. It was palpable, and you can see what they're trying to do, and they will be very successful. So conversely, I've been in others where you can tell they've gone through a big period of change. And I do talk a lot about the maturity of an organisation and the life cycle of an organisation, because it goes through waves, as we know. So I think you need to look at where you are in that life cycle. So there's a lot in that, but I'm more than happy to talk to anyone who wants to know more.
And then going from that then, so working with, massive enterprise level companies to then launching your own EQA. That's, I mean, what's the, I suppose, what have you taken from, that large scale company that's helped EQA, get off the ground so quickly? Because, I mean, you've already won some huge contracts and projects with global brands, while loads of other consultancies are struggling and making redundancies and cutting back, you seem to be thriving. So, what are your key takeaways?
It's a good question. I mean, a big shout out to EQA, which, for those that don't know, is a sort of optimizing sort of processes and businesses and unlocking sort of benefits, whether that's financial or not. So yeah, I think it's been something I've been desperate to do for a while. When I was at VMO2, hand on heart, I had one of the best teams, and I think I realised that if you've got a good team around you, it makes everything look good, including yourself. So I think recruit the best, get the best people on board, I think is really important. And then some of the more serious aspects was be really clear on what your sort of focus is. Okay, so have a plan, and I was really, really clear on sort of, I almost did an IPO as if I was selling a business. This is where we'd operate. This is where I think the value is. This is the segmentation, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a full analysis, right? So recognize you need a plan, and you do. But also recognize that plan can go out the window, because our routes to market have not, and our successes have not been the way that we imagined. So the way that EQA has thrived is with post-COVID. I'm sure it's not just post-COVID, but there is a lot of, we hear about AI every day and technology sets and, the way sort of automation and the impact it'll have. There are some brilliant product developers out there. I mean, brilliant. And they're far cleverer than you and I, but they're not sure the value of the product they've developed, they're not sure how to, A, they don't really understand the benefits in a business context, and two, how to take it to market. So the way in which we've actually, so our plan was the same, our services are the same and well defined, and our themes of activity, but how we got there is completely different. So we've been using some really clever product, let's call them designers, developers, who've got some brilliant stuff going on in the ecosystem of businesses and sectors. You know, retail is one. And then we've been taking it, we've piloted it, we've run it, proof of concept, if you like, demonstrated the product. We've got the USP, you know, and the way in which it could be utilised. And then quite frankly, it's been quite an easy sell because it's that powerful. So we've probably got 4 or 5 amazing products that the people who've designed the products are happy to just do the product. And we end up doing the service wrap effectively. So we will do the analysis, the design, the interpretation from this product and the data. And then we play it back to the client, and the client goes, this is amazing. And then that leads to all sorts of stuff. So, you know, I think for me, it's all the learnings from how to develop a plan and a structure and a proposition, how to take it to market, and then realize that actually something else may just come out and help you and support you in that growth. So we're still doing all the traditional stuff, but EQA has been a great example. And I think that's the best way to give yourself an opportunity, and don't try and get it 100% right. Just learn by your mistakes, by your failings. You know, I personally have cocked up loads of times. You know, I think EQA has had massive learnings. Don't be afraid to fail. You know, as long as it keeps you off the sort of news page or whatever. But just keep trying. You know, no one is intentionally trying to, you know, do something wrong. You know, we're trying to do the right thing for our clients and customers, and I think that comes through.
That's something that keeps on coming up. Launch fast, fail fast, learn fast. And just make sure you don't fail so colossally.
If we fail more than twice, I'll be concerned. But I think that's fair. I think sometimes we can overthink, we can overanalyze, and we can challenge ourselves and tie ourselves in knots and just do it, and then see where it goes, and take it from there. But yeah, no, thanks. EQA is doing really well. So.
And I suppose the question that kind of comes up, brand new company, no like prior brand like strength behind you. What do you do to sort of get that brand, that positioning? You know, how do you kind of promote that?
So I think, you know, there's the traditional ways, you know, which everyone knows. You know, whether that's LinkedIn or mail shots and stuff. And then, I mean, I was at an expo this week, you know, and there's a lot of it is from network and credibility, and the message that you're trying to convey, not in the services, but the way in which you behave. And what we didn't want to be was, and this is no disrespect to sort of suit wearing sort of consultants, because I was one of them, but just try and be a little bit more collaborative and longer term, and we're very flexible. I suppose what we've created is a commercial model that's really flexible as well. So I think we've done sort of, it's very, as I say, modular. We've done about 10 different moving parts. And I think when they all work well together, it sort of pushes us, you know, to success. So we'll carry on doing it and not take anything for granted.
Brilliant. And one of the reasons why we originally jumped on the call, well, one of the things that came up quite early on was the fitness side of things.
Yeah.
And you've held some super high, you know, high stress positions. And you mentioned, you know, how the fitness element, how that kind of helps with the business performance, physical resilience, mental resilience. And I mean, I don't know how you fit all the time in to do this, but have you got your own PT business where you work with high flying professionals as well, helping them to, keep operating at their peak?
Yeah. So I think I've trained over 3,000 clients. Selfishly, I did it because I wanted to learn I only do individuals, I don't do groups. I wanted to work with the best, whether that's professional people or sports people, whatever. So, as I say, 3,000 clients. I've been privileged two things. One is to go to some of the best business schools, which is great. And Oracle was amazing for that, and sponsorship and HP. And so that was amazing. But I've also so that's the academic side. But I've also learned probably more from the human sort of condition and what motivates us intrinsically and what doesn't, doing the PT. And it's inspiring, something that's been my passion for the last 25 years. And as you say, I've been lucky enough to, to have my own sort of gym and work, and train with some really, really, talented individuals. And that opens up a whole different, maybe it's another podcast, Mike, but that's fascinating, the learnings from that. And I flip-flop from why is it so hard to it's very hard. And you'll know, being into your fitness, I think it's a multi-billion pound industry. Yeah. But I'm pretty convinced, I could work with a large percentage, and I do. And make their objectives come true, and consistently come true. But for some reason, we struggle. And I think the greatest example, and it wasn't a nice example to go through, was COVID. Because and I'll finish on this, but maybe if your listeners can, just think about it. Every single client I had, bar none, has always said to me over 20 years, if I didn't have to go out, if I didn't have to have birthdays or christenings or weddings or funerals, I didn't have to go out for meals, I would be super fit, because I would stay in, I wouldn't go out at night, I'd be just going to bed at 10, I'd be eating better, and it would reduce a lot of my anxiety, so I wouldn't be as stressed because I would, and whatever. So just part that, because some people were obviously under more stress with COVID. But so COVID came along, and we haven't got the data, but I can tell you from the clients that I had pre-COVID to post-COVID, very few, if any, improved their performance. So over a 2-year lockdown, where potentially they didn't have to go anywhere, I would say their physical and mental condition deteriorated. Now, It's not as simple as that, but it makes me think about the narrative that we tell ourselves, and actually doing a full circle. Post-COVID, everyone said, I'll start getting fitter when I've got a bit more structure to my day. so we'll leave it at that. So because there's a lot in that, and I'm not belittling or the COVID, because that was awful, but people were isolated and one thing and another, so I get all that. But from a mental coping mechanism and inflammation and fatigue, people really struggled.
I found it crazy how they shut down gyms where people could get themselves more healthy to protect them. I remember being quite strong pre-COVID, going back into the gym when they opened back up and struggling to lift like 60 kilos. It just wouldn't move. It's crazy how quickly you can.
And I'm not talking about big training here. I'm talking about just movement. I'm just saying the ability to go for a walk. People who've got children and stuff, and one thing and another, and we're working full time and weekends. And that's when I listen to a lot of these professional podcasts. I get it, but it has to be couched in in the reality of the way, you know, 80-90% of the people live their lives, and it's very difficult, and no one knows that more than me. And having trained that number of clients that are doing all these competing things, I get it. But it is interesting how we change the narrative to suit our sort of, you know, the story and what we want to tell. But I think, you know, the coping mechanisms needed post-COVID and need to be stronger and used more even before COVID. So it's interesting, but
it seems like there's been a huge awakening though, doesn't it? So people before were probably not quite as clued in on, you know, the diet and exercise and how important it was, and, you know, what chemicals they're putting in their body, on the skin, everything like that. And there does seem to be quite a big awakening. I mean, I'm a big believer that, you know, if you can push yourself physically, when it comes to like the mental stress at work, or something doesn't go your way, just gives you a bit more of that resilience to work through it. And I just wondered if you had any examples from clients that you've worked with where, you know, they've improved their physical fitness and it's had a huge impact on their, you know, their business performance.
yeah, I mean, there's loads. In fact, I would say every person, bar none, because when you're in a confined space with me, you know, you've got endorphins running, you've got serotonin, you've got dopamine, you've got all sorts going on, chemicals. A lot of people who train say it's for fitness and to look better, to feel better, but actually it's not. They're coping with other things that have gone on in their lives and stuff. So I think, and that comes out over time. So I think once you understand why you're actually there, you know, self-esteem, low self-esteem, you wouldn't believe in some of the most successful people I've trained on the face of it, whatever success looks like, you know, whether it's monetary or what, but really struggle. So, you know, and that's from, as I say, professional sort of business people to sports people. So never assume really when you see someone why they're training. I think some of the things that you can do, I mean, you say about, you know, gives you sort of prepares you for, you know, for working sort of in an environment that is taxing, you know, just doing basic stuff. So I always try and get sunlight in the day if I can, have a walk. I know it's not good in the UK at the moment, but at least try and get a little bit of sunlight. I do have a cold shower. I have done for a long time, even before HOF. You know, and that gives you certainly resilience if you could do that. I never have, I love coffee or caffeine, but I never usually have one till at least 2 hours or something after I've got up, because that helps with the flushing out the cortisol, which you're going to get a rush in the morning typically, and so on and so forth. So there's protocols and these hacks that you can do every day. And I think when you do that, and then you get on top of your diet, which we've not even spoke about, and then you get your exercise, then you get everything else. It's all of these things again,
Yeah.
which just make you feel better. You drink less, you know, alcohol, that is, sorry. You sleep better, you know, you're more alert. Your concentration, you know, it is higher. I mean, they're doing some clinical trials at the moment about exercise in the morning versus in the afternoon. I'm terrible in the morning. I prefer to do it in the afternoon. Most people are like to do it in the morning, but they reckon if you do it in the morning, it will give you more motivation and energy for them sort of for first 2 or 3 hours, and that makes sense. So you'll be up for it, you know. So the whole thing with, you know, Jeff from Amazon, where he says he only makes decisions early in the morning when he's you know, big decisions, strategic ones. He does more relationship stuff in the evening and afternoon and stuff. That sort of makes sense to me. It's not simple as that, but I think there is something about, you know, looking in the mirror every morning and starting the day in a positive way, and challenging yourself. And I think if you can get into the habits, we talk about good habits and bad habits, it's a lot easier to get into a good habit. But I'm more interested in consistency.
Yep.
And that consistency isn't 12 months for me, it's 5 years. So if I see a client after 5 years from training with me and they're still in the same place or better, that's a big thumbs up. I think consistency is completely underrated. It's what you do every day. And it's not boring because you can still do the fun bits, but you have got to be consistent. Doing it once a week, and always remember what you do today is not for today, it's for in 10 years' time. That's the way I look at it. It's not you're doing it today, tomorrow, October, but it's actually for 12 months, 2 years, 5 years time. So, just try and get in good habits, which is so important.
On the last call you mentioned the coffee thing, and it's something that I knew about, but I'd got out the habit of doing it. You come down, you put a coffee on, and then you're right, you get to 2, 3 in the afternoon and you feel absolutely knackered. Whereas if you wait an hour, 2 hours before having one, you're fine in the afternoon. It makes such a big difference.
Yeah. What it is, it attaches to, I think it's called adenosine. So it's the receptors in the brain. It can make you tired. I mean, the simple thing to do is I do have a coffee first thing if I'm going to exercise. As I say, I don't really do morning exercise, but don't have more than about 400 milligrams, I would say, in a day. And every single shop, every single coffee you have will have varying amounts. So whatever that is, whether it's 2 or 3, I wouldn't go more than that. And I know people who have no sensitivity whatsoever and can have a coffee, the strongest coffee, going to bed, and the deep sleep, the REM, and everything is fantastic. I've got others in their heads, and I'm not saying it's not true, but if they have a coffee after midday, they can't sleep. So yeah, so everyone, you're all unique, tailored differently. Take control of your own sort of health and what works for you and what doesn't. And recognize the signs of stress.
Fantastic. Well, I think we've covered a fair bit there, and I think we could probably cover loads more, because each one of these topics, it's an hour in itself. But I was just really keen to get your thoughts on some of those key points. And I really appreciate your time.
No problem. It's been a pleasure. Have a good weekend and do some exercise. Yeah,
well, Friday gym day, off to do back.